Barbara LeVan Fisher, right? Thank
Right.
you so much for joining me on Zoom In. I greatly appreciate that. You look beautiful.
Well, you do too. It's a pleasure to be with you.
I have to say, I was looking up your book. It's not available for purchase anywhere. It's not on Amazon. It's not on Goodreads. I did a Google search. Why isn't it available?
Well, okay, the story behind that is that it was published in 2017, and right as I was getting ready to, go out and speak and sell the book, my publisher went out of business. He was a small hybrid publisher, traditional and sort of self-publishing also. So during that time, I was living with my mother, taking care of her. She was dying. And so I got, off track with the book for a while, but I'm happy to say I'm going to be self-publishing. It will be available later this year, hopefully in the next couple of months.
Okay.
And I will be advertising it on Facebook and other social media, arenas, and I'll be doing YouTube videos talking about Hildegard. So it was delayed, but it will be available soon.
And there was a reason for that, because now
yeah.
Time for Saint Hildegard. Now is time for her.
Absolutely. At the time it was kind of heartbreaking,
right.
But I got over it. And yes, I realized looking back on it now,
right.
I was preparing for now, and as I mentioned to you, the last 7.5 years of my life, really, I have been preparing for this, because 7.5 years ago, the life I had led until I was 59 was pretty much similar. And then boom, everything changed within a period of months. Wow. And that's when I decided to write the book.
Well, I'm so glad you did. Okay. How did you come across Saint Hildegard? Because I recently just learned about her, like literally just a couple months ago.
Oh, great.
I'd never heard about her before. And so it was, and I'm like, wow, I was just like floored about how incredible this woman was, is.
Yeah.
So how did you come across Saint Hildegard?
Okay. So basically I first found out about Hildegard when I was in my early 20s. And I was, I was very spiritual, my whole life, pretty much. I didn't really know I was mystically oriented until, maybe 10 years ago. But I have been my whole life, I think. So I discovered her via her music. And I've loved her music. I was a big fan of hers, but I didn't really know her life story. I didn't really know much about her as a person until 7 years ago, when I found a book, which I thought I had right here. Here it is. I found this book written by Matthew Fox. And basically the focus of this book that I loved so much was focusing on her connection to nature, her deep spirituality connected to nature, and her mysticism. And but really, this book is about her activism. She was an activist, absolutely. And up until the time when all of this happened 7.5 years ago, I had pretty much focused on art and graphic design. And so in different times of my life, I chose role models, to inspire me. When I was doing artwork, George O'Keeffe was one of my favorite painters. When I was doing book covers, there's a man named Chip Kidd, who's one of the premier book designers in the United States. He was sort of my role model. And then when I hit this very odd time in my life, I would call it a dark night of the soul, where a number of things that really gave me a sense of stability and comfort were taken away from me, just suddenly within 6 months, such as my parents dying. We were going through all kinds of problems in publishing with the Kindle. People weren't sure whether the book was going to become obsolete, which means my business would dry up because I designed book covers.
You have some amazing book covers, by the way. You are an amazing artist. I was looking at your website and I'm like, Wow, you are very talented.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I worked with Harper San Francisco, which is a division of HarperCollins, which originally was created to keep up with the spiritual and cultural revolution of the 60s and 70s. People actually came out to San Francisco to be here. So I worked with them for about 15 years, and I worked on phenomenal projects, you know, from Ram Dass's sequel to Be Here Now, Be Love Now, to Deepak Chopra's novels about the prophets, a lot of church history. And since I'm an Episcopalian, so I was part of the church. This was all fascinating. It was new to me. It was just a phenomenal education working with Harper. So I've had my own business, LeVan Fisher Design, for the last 21 years, and I've made a living basically designing book covers, which is kind of a weird occupation, but I love it. And I've done many, many metaphysical books too. But anyway, so getting back to Hildegard. So I was in a very dark place in 2013, 2014. And the way I look at it is I had one mission up until that point, and then my mission changed, but I didn't know it. So God had a way of just kind of getting rid of the past, which forced me to look to the future. And it forced me inside. It forced me to develop my contemplative nature, which had always been there. I'm an introvert. I like to spend a lot of time at home and reading, and I contemplate life every day, pretty much. So when I got to that point where I had been working very hard, I was probably almost on the verge of a nervous breakdown with the pressure that was being put on me with publishing. And I thought I've got to keep my book cover business going, but I have to modify it. So I had to quit my relationship with Harper because it was one of those corporate times where everyone was just under the gun. It was not healthy for me. So I now work with more medium-sized and smaller publishers like New World Library. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they do some of the most wonderful metaphysical books, and Hay House and people like that. So my whole life shifted, and I was depressed. I was very, very depressed, and I didn't really want to do anything. And the only thing I wanted to do was write the book about Hildegard. It was strange, honestly. That was the only thing I had energy for. And so basically I started studying her life. I started designing the book just on my own. And then all these synchronicities started happening. And I had never had so many synchronicities in my life. I didn't even really know what a synchronicity was. But anyway, long story short, I went to a book launch at Grace Cathedral in San Francisco, and it was a book that the Episcopal bishop and Matthew Fox wrote about the cosmic Christ. And I met the publisher, and we had lunch, and he told me about his business. I told him about mine, and then he started eating lunch, and he goes, "Now tell me more about yourself." So I happened to have my computer there, and I opened it up, and I said, "Well, I'm working on this book about Hildegard of Bingen." And he said, "Well, I'd like to publish that book." And I said, "What?" Because as you probably know, people without a following, without a history, rarely get their books published with traditional publishers. Right. So I had 12 pages of it done. And I already had a publisher. That's just uncanny, in publishing. So that was one of the things that made me realize this was the direction I needed to go in. So the publisher wanted it right away. So within a year, I had designed. So I wrote it and I designed it, and this was one of the few copies that were printed. So it's full color throughout. It's very visual. And it basically follows a format that I was directed to do, which is like two-page discussion, meditation on various subjects related to Hildegard's life. So it's very easy to read because you could do like 2 pages at a time and look at the illustrations. And so it's for lay people, basically, and leaders also who teach. But I really, like you said, I really wanted people in the West to know about Hildegard.
Well, I had never heard of her. I did not know that she was German. I did not know she was an artist. I mean, she was multi-talented, and then 12th century, and I'm like, huh? Who is she? Why is she born?
Exactly.
And it's like, okay, so I was born Catholic, but I separated myself from the church a long time ago. And and I've dabbled in different religions, but I'm just like, I've learned so much in different religions because I find it fascinating, but so much is happening now, and I know tomorrow is the Lion's Gate. People are saying, and it's also a new moon, and people are saying all this new energy is coming in, and then we have this COVID thing that is wiping people out. And I mean, speaking of synchronicities, all these things are happening all at once. Right?
Climate change is another, big one. Of course.
You have fire, earthquakes, volcano eruptions, and so the timing of these saints or these knowings of people coming out now. I think now is the time to start learning about, these messages. How do we step into this knowingness? How do we claim? I want to say power. This wisdom.
I agree.
How do we learn about it? Because you said like there's like an inner knowingness of connectedness with God.
Yes.
So how do we find this knowledge? And then through this book, will you be offering any type of classes? Like you mentioned your YouTube. You want to do YouTube because I know people want to connect, but they don't know how to.
Yes. I'm still thinking about the long-term plan for my book, because I actually, when I first started writing the book, I had a vision of 3 books. One would be Hildegard, and of course that's who I was focused on. So I read that. I mean, I wrote that one first, and so the vision was to have a book about Hildegard of Bingen and the divine feminine and mysticism. So you've got the divine feminine and mysticism wrapped around Hildegard, to learn that. The next book would be about Saint Francis, and it would be about the divine masculine, and it would be focusing on shamanism, which is similar, has a lot of overlaps with mysticism, but there are some differences too. And the third book would be called The Spirit of the Cosmic Christ. That's the working title. And that would be about spirituality and how all the great religions interconnect and they say the same thing. So that would be really geared toward people understanding other people's faith. So we don't have to be afraid of them, and we don't have to demonize them anymore. And see them as not connected to the God that we love, and the God that we know. So those were the 3 books. So, and with that in mind, I'm also working on a website for my publishing effort, which will be called Veriditas Press, which is one of Hildegard's favorite words. And it's a Latin word, which basically means greening of the soul, greening of the earth. And it's absolutely related to the divine feminine. What she said was, if we suppress the divine feminine, which we have, as you know, for thousands of years, then the world will dry up and lose its greenness. Okay. So there she was back in the 12th century in the High Middle Ages, talking about really what's happening now. Right. And she was known as the Sibyl of the Rhine River. So she She was born in Bermersheim, I don't know, near Bingen. So she's known as Hildegard of Bingen. But this is right near the Rhine River. And then her monasteries were on either side of the Rhine. She built 2 monasteries in her lifetime for the nuns that she worked with. And so basically her whole life was about liberation. It was about knowing God, expanding her consciousness, not just through contemplative prayer and singing and the services, but also through study. She was a polymath, and she never had any formal education, which is astounding when you think about what she accomplished. She would give advice to the emperor of the time. Like she knew Frederick Barbarossa, the emperor, and had the gall to write him letters and tell him what to do. And she had a relationship with the King of England, Henry II. And she had a very good relationship with her Pope at the time, Eugenius II. And had it not been for the Pope recognizing the validity of her writings, she could have easily been excommunicated. And if she had been excommunicated, there was no place for her to go. She would have probably starved to death. So this is the plight of women, in the high Middle Ages. And she was like a rising star. She had so many tragedies, so many hurdles to overcome during her time in her life. And she aced them all. It was truly astounding. This is why I wanted to write and design a visual book so people could kind of picture themselves like back then and what she had to go through, because we are experiencing similar confusion. We're dealing with so many things that are beyond our own individual intelligence. We need wisdom. We need wisdom from higher sources, as many higher sources as possible. So I chose Hildegard. I'm sure there are other people that are doing other books to increase our consciousness so that we can deal with this new world. This is literally a new world, that's emerging. And that's what I believe. That we're making a consciousness shift. The human collective is making a unprecedented cosmic consciousness shift. We have to, because of the potential for our extinction.
Well, I know it's always inspiring to learn of someone who's overcome so much.
Yes.
Especially, like you said, no formal training, and to just overcome these obstacles and just do it, and just,
right.
And
yes. There's a German word called ungebildet or something like that, which means an uneducated or ignorant person. And she called herself that. She used that word. So she, like the Buddhists say, have a beginner mind. She definitely had a beginner mind. Like she was just open to everything, and she studied and she applied it, and the other remarkable thing about her, she started having visions, like going into a trance and seeing lights and having visions at the age of 3.
Oh, wow.
And then she was one of 10 children. So she was tithed to the church at somewhere between the age of 5 and 8. So she had to leave her family, at that young age. And she went into a monastery with her mentor, whose name was Jutta. She was a very respected leader in that area and in the church. And Jutta lived in an anchor hold, which is a small room with 3 windows for things to go in and out. She was absolutely, a hermit and spent most of her time praying. So Hildegard grew up with Jutta, who was her role model, but Jutta also practiced flagellation. which, and so Hildegard was exposed to this at a young age, and she did not like it. So she everything that she did as a nun and an abbess, eventually, was all geared toward health and really toward enjoying your life and pleasure. She felt God loved beauty and loved pleasure. And so she built large rooms for her nuns. When she disengaged from the monastery that she grew up in, which is a whole other story, let me tell you. But she managed to take 15 nuns to Rupertsberg, Germany. They created a new monastery that was for women only. And like I said, the rooms were large for the nuns. They had running water. It was pretty upscale. And they had the medicinal and the herbal gardens, and then they had the vineyards. So they grew their own food. They had a very natural, organic lifestyle. And this is something we need to go back to. I know we all talk about this, right? And the hippies, talked about this, of course, with the communes and so forth. And that was a step in the direction of where we need to go, in the future. So my own personal experience has been, over the last, let's say, 30 years, I've gone from a house that was 2,400 square feet, to another house that was 1,100 square feet. And now I live in a small house of 800 square feet. And I live a minimalist lifestyle. I've scaled way back so I can focus on what I really want to do in my life, which is gardening and growing my own food and spending time in nature and reading and maybe teaching if that is what happens ultimately. But yes, I mean, I'm a huge fan of Hildegard. So I'm taking it a step at a time and just see where it goes. But definitely the YouTube videos will be coming up soon, and hopefully a couple more books. And then I'll have the Viriditas Press website where people can go and see what's happening. So
it seems like just the fact that you've connected here and you have written this book.
Yes.
It sounds like you are being called to start teaching in a way. Because the book is beautiful, and what I've read, I have not read the entire book yet. I've just read a couple of chapters because it's been a very crazy past couple of weeks.
Oh, right. Sounds like you've been through a lot lately.
It's been rather tumultuous, but it really does sound like people need to start hearing about this. Reconnecting, going back to basics, and I love that people know about it. It sounds like, in order for us to know this information, it all had to be journaled. People were documenting, keeping track. And I think people have lost track of the art of writing.
Yes.
Like, okay, right now it seems like everyone's caught up in Twittering or, Facebooking. And it's like, okay, we need to know more than what you ate. But actually, but to journal, it's like, your thoughts,
going inward,
right? Going inward, and the family, and writing about like the nun who, whipping herself. Can you imagine a child witnessing that?
I know.
Choosing, to be, to choose to separate herself from that. The wisdom of the child. I mean, so many children would automatically think that's the way.
Right.
But already at such a young age to acknowledge. So I think these are the stories that we need to start putting out there. Because so many young people, they're getting caught up in it's like, what brand should I wear? What kind of new face should I put on? Liposuction face. And so to start shifting that narrative.
Absolutely. Yes.
So important, and to to find music and the arts and it all goes within. So I think it's so important, and she's so representative of that.
Yes, she is. And yes, I getting back to what we had been talking about earlier, I think that all the quote unquote apocalypses, which, you know, the Greek meaning of that is unveiling, it's not destruction of everything.
Right.
All of these apocalypses that we're going through are all saying the same thing. You know, they're saying basically, you've lost sight of your soul. You know, and part of what one of the biggest ways you've lost sight of your soul is you have disconnected from nature. And Mother Nature is the being, or the Mother Nature gives us everything we need to live. We need to give back to her. We need to respect her. We need to be more like the indigenous cultures, you know, which, as you know, the indigenous cultures are really speaking up right now. And I wanted to tell you two things. Okay, regarding my being related to Hildegard, I want to tell this story because people have what you might consider to be, you know, psychic or supernatural experiences all the time. And it's very easy to dismiss that in the West because we don't even know we have an energetic body, most of us, you know, with chakras. I mean, this is all fairly new in our culture. So we have a physical body, but we have an energetic body, and we need to balance both of those. And the only way we can balance them is to know, to be informed, right? So this is all, I just want to back up 1 second and say, for many years, I was involved with the evangelical church because that was kind of the only thing available to me that I knew about. You know, they're completely clueless when it comes to the psychic energy running through our bodies. Okay. So anyway, so I've been learning this over like the last 20 to 30 years. I've been learning, you know, thanks to some of the books I've worked on. So I'm ahead of the group, I would say. But I had an experience well before I wrote the book. This was probably 4 or 5 years before I wrote the book. And I was having lunch with a couple of friends. One of them was a psychic. And he stopped in the middle of what he was eating and he said, you know, I feel like someone's channeling Hildegard of Bingen here. So the other friend I was with was a priest, you know. So we looked over and we're like, yeah, it's got to be Jill. You know, I didn't think it was me. So that was the first thing that happened. And then I was working for Harper, San Francisco. And there was a period of time where they kept giving me Catholic books. And at that time I was studying meditation and Buddhism. And I kept saying to the art director, I want Buddhist books, please. And she's like, you're the only one who can get these covers approved. I'm not a Catholic, you know, like I've never been a Catholic. So it's mysterious how these things happen. So I went through several years of working on books like Father James Martin. He's a very well-known Jesuit priest, wonderful man. He's leading the charge for the gay and lesbian, you know, liberation within the Catholic Church. Just an amazing guy. Anyway, so I had the psychic tell me that. Then I started getting all these Catholic books. Then my life, like I said, started falling apart. I was entering a dark night of the soul. And then when I read this book about Hildegard, it changed my life. It just changed my life. And then I had, maybe a year after I read this book, I had what's called a Kundalini experience, Kundalini awakening. This is another thing people don't know about and are suspicious of, but it's an ancient reality that happens where we have an energetic source that is locked within our body, which gets triggered. And for me, it was triggered when I was going through trauma, but it was one of the most, I tell you, beautiful experiences I've ever had in my life. I felt a communion with everything like I'd never felt before. So extraordinary things were happening to me during 2014, 2015. I mean, I could write a whole book on just what happened to me, but I want to create a space where people are free to talk about these things without feeling that somehow we're leaning in the direction of something that's a cult or something that's dangerous or unchristian,
Yeah,
you know?
well, yeah, because there was a time if you mentioned anything like that, you're crazy, you know.
Well, right. You know, you would be branded as a woo-woo person, right?
Literally,
Well,
yeah, you would be called crazy, you know.
that's right.
Yeah,
That's
so
right.
and
Yeah.
I what if more and more people are, you know, having these experiences. And so interesting,
Yeah.
you said, you know, you had this experience in 2014, 2015, because I'm meeting more and more people. I mean, I had my own experience in 2015, and
Really?
and
Oh, really?
I ended up having a concussion. I had a
Uh-huh.
fall, and
Uh-huh.
it was so interesting. I landed on the back of my head, and nothing
Uh-huh.
was helping. I had a Reiki experience where I ended up having an out of body experience that scared the bejesus out of me, but it got me on my path.
Yeah.
I scared the bejesus out of the Reiki master, poor thing. But that was, but that got me on my path. Uh,
Interesting. Yes.
so fast, but more and more people I've been meeting, it was between 2012 and 2015 they were having that
Yes.
experience, which I'm learning 2012, the Mayan calendar. So
That's
many,
right.
and more and more of us are connecting. So I'm so excited.
Yes. Yes.
Yes,
I
you
have, it's taken me 7 years of researching and reading to even put those, you know, connect those dots. Because yes, 2012 was the end of the Mayan calendar, and it was the end of a Yugo, I think, cycle, which is, you know, from Hindu beliefs. So I think this is all connected with this consciousness shift that's happening. None of us knows how it's going to pan out or how long it's going to take, but it is happening. I have no doubt. And part of what I wanted to really say about how Hildegard helped me, I was looking for a new role model, and I was looking for hope, because it felt like my life as a baby boomer, making money, you know, and living a comfortable lifestyle, it felt meaningless to me at that point. And so I was looking for meaning, absolutely. And when I had the Kundalini experience, the way I describe it, it felt like everything on the outside fell apart and everything on the inside fell together. That's the closest I can come to describing that. So I became a person who was fully connected to my inner self, and my whole value system changed. You know, it was not about me anymore. It's about us. It's about the whole human family. And so, like I said, I just started downsizing. I started, you know, like talking to homeless people, giving them food, and, you know, just doing whatever I could to help anyone, because that is really our spiritual work. So let's see. The point I wanted to make, which is Hildegard is such a beautiful example of, was she became someone who was inner directed primarily, but she was absolutely fascinated with everything outside also. So she had this amazing balance between the divine feminine, which is intuition, which she had, you know, in spades. And she had a brain, an intellectual brain that was genius. Right. So to tell you, just to give you a list of what she's known for, okay? She was a Benedictine abbess, polymath. She was a writer, author, musical composer, philosopher, mystic, physician, scientist, visionary, prophet, artist, choreographer, and poet. I mean, the woman had it all, you know? So the word I like to use for making this transition from being outward focused to inner focused is to find your sovereignty, you know? Instead of looking in the past like we've looked to leaders, royals, they're our sovereigns. We obey everything they do, right? Some people think of politicians, you know, as their go-to person for their belief system, and we know where that has gotten us, you know. So this is about shifting from being a follower to being sovereign and sitting on the throne of your own life.
Right.
This is how we're going to get out of the problems that we're in right now. And this is how she made it through the Holy Wars. You know, she was lucky enough to be born before the Inquisition really ramped up. She was lucky enough to be born before the plague, the bubonic plague. So again, she's just an icon of surviving and thriving in a very difficult scenario. And I want to add also, you know, because she was a physician, and she did have access to medical books through, you know, the church. So she was self-taught, and her mentor Valmar, who was a male monk, he also was very well educated, so he helped educate her. But let's see, I lost my train of thought. So basically, she was able to become the sovereign of her own life, even though she didn't have a formal education. And she just broke so many glass ceilings, you know, at that time for women. It was just unbelievable. So also I wanted to just say that I think that right now, what we are going through as a collective psychologically is, in a sense, what started way back with the Greeks and the Egyptians, further back, the Egyptians. They had mystery schools. And this was all about learning about the inner knowledge and the inner wisdom that we have as human beings. And it was very, back then in Egypt and Greece, only certain people were allowed. It was very elitist, you might say. But I think we're reaching a time where life has become a mystery school, and we need some really good guides, because it's not easy. It's confusing. It's terrifying what people are going through with COVID and climate change. And it's heartbreaking to watch people go through it. Now we've got the internet, and we have we can see instantly what's going on all around the world. And it is heartbreaking. And that is part of the dark night of the soul, is having your heart break and open up toward the world.
I think what's hardest nowadays is people don't really trust themselves.
Yes, that's right.
Know themselves. And
yes,
I think it goes back to, we're so caught up in being part of the internet. Now, don't get me wrong, I appreciate the internet, because we're able to, you know,
absolutely,
we didn't have this, you know, and we're able to, and because of it, we're able to learn about Saint Hildegard.
Yes,
and mutual friend Alejandra in Greece, you know.
Yeah, right.
I'm grateful for that. So, but I think it comes back to the balance, and because of Saint Hildegard, I think she teaches us to, you know, get to know ourselves, and find that balance and that groundedness and that connectedness, you know.
Yes.
To source and self. And I think people get confused by that, because we're, you know, I think, I hate to say this, but it almost feels like society as a whole wants to keep us off kilter, like this big pinball machine. You know, it's like keep everything in a state of chaos. It's like, then we have this elite few that keeps it, you know, keeps everything, keeps everyone in control. Because can you imagine if everyone claimed their own sovereignty? You know, what the possibilities could be.
I know. And
wow.
Well, right. And let me just back up for a minute and say that I actually, in 2014, because I was isolated and living alone and not working that much, and I was meditating, you know, every single day. I was walking in nature. I was so connected. And I still am, but that was a special time period for me. During that time period, I had visions, you know, like I actually had visions. And one of them was a vision of the future that was beautiful. Without going into a lot of detail, the message of the vision was that we will, as a species, get to that point where we're balancing indigenous wisdom with technical know-how. So that is an integration of the masculine and feminine, you know. And when I say masculine and feminine, I don't mean men and women. Most people don't know that we all have masculine and feminine energies that we are responsible for managing.
Right.
And so right now, the energies are at a polarity, the male and the female, religion and non-religion, black and white. We're out of balance. Our ecosystem, our psychic ecosystem, as well as our physical ecosystem, is polarized. So we need to bring it back around. And the only way we can do that is here, through the heart and through educating ourselves. So there are little mystery schools popping up all over the place right now, which I've never seen anything like this before. I'm part of a women's group that we consider ourselves a mystery school, and it's focusing on empowering women. It's called OWLS, and it stands for Offering Women Loving Support. And we meet once a month, and it's been very helpful for me. We all need this, So the other vision I had, this was before Eric Garner was killed, and that famous quote, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe," just hit the world. So probably a little less than a year before that happened, I woke up at 2:00 in the morning, and I had a vision of the future that was very painful. And I started crying. And what I heard was, "I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe." And it felt like Mother Earth was saying that to me. And I can't tell you how horrifying I felt at the thought of Mother Earth being that distressed. So that was another vision I had. And so right after that happened, within a month or two, I had visions of people protesting, like huge numbers of people. And in the vision, they were very creative. People were wearing masks and different, outfits and music. And it was basically a non-violent form of protest. This was before, the women's movement started, the latest one with the pink hats. The black and white protests, the protests regarding injustice and equality all over the world, in the last few years have been phenomenal. And we get to see them, on video. So there is a connection that's being made just thanks to the internet. Right. So I call myself an optimistical person, because as I said to you, the mystics all think, their thing is all is well. And, for years I was like, what does that mean? And so my own personal philosophy is, it's one side of a coin. All is well is within here, our mystical intuitive part. And I call it the WTF. Is the other side. That's our life, right? So we have both in our life. But the more we can integrate those, the more we'll be able to deal with the tragic realities that are happening around us all the time. Right. So that is the word I love about Hildegard. She integrated things, and that's a big word right now in many, many forms of study, science and psychology. So that's what I'm working on for myself. And this is what I think is Hildegard's message. That's what you're responsible for. You're responsible for balancing that in your own life. And if we all focus on that, that's going to spread. And then there's that 100th monkey, syndrome, where if enough people do it, then it just kind of takes off, Right. So I have a lot of hope for the future, but I'm realistic too. There's going to be a lot of pain before, there is a lot of pain currently, but the pain is what's triggering us to make changes. And that is, I think the flow of enlightenment is that we go through pain so that we can grow and we can solve, come up with solutions for our problems.
So we don't have to have pain anymore, or do you think there'll always be pain? Do you think pain is part of evolution?
Well, I think I'm an Epicurean, so I'm big on pleasure and enjoying life. My mother was a Stoic. We used to get into, conflicts about that. But in any case, another reason I love Hildegard. Okay, her favorite beverages were beer and wine. Yes, yes. She was very out of the norm in the sense that when she created rituals and did services in certain special services, her nuns would take their habit or their wimple or whatever off, and they would wear flowers in their hairs and tiaras and beautiful fabrics. Okay. So, and by the way, I don't think I mentioned that she wrote an allegorical morality play called Ordo Virtutum. And so she was known as really the first person to write an opera in ever. Okay. That just add that to her list of accomplishments. And so she and her nuns would dress up beautifully, and they would do a service with, Ordo Virtutum or whatever. People, other nuns thought that was just outrageous, and she was getting called on the carpet all the time, believe me. But she believed that God loves beauty, and God created us to be beautiful. Yes, we should be modest, in the way we live, but we can get dressed up and we can have fun and look beautiful and be theatrical. That's all part of her creative message. Right. And like I said, she had running water in the monastery for the nuns. She had a very realistic schedule for her nuns. There was no extremism. She wanted the nuns to have the healthiest, most enjoyable life they could have. And I agree with that. It makes no sense to me that we should make ourselves suffer any more than we have to. So I think there will always be suffering to some degree because, we live in a world where we get attached to people and animals and ideas, and when they go away, we suffer. But I don't think we should add any suffering to our lives or anyone else's. We should.
Right.
The goal should be for health and vitality. And that's what the Viriditas concept is about: living a healthy, green, succulent life, full of life.
This time. And this was the 12th century. This was like the 12th century,
I know. It is amazing. And there are so many things about her life that positioned her to become the person she was, because she was born in a very aristocratic family. So she was exposed to, a noble sort of lifestyle until the age of 5. So she took some of that with her, I think. And really, I think, and by the way, the nuns that she had 15 nuns when she first moved from the monastery, which is called Disibode Monastery, which was built to honor Saint Disibode, who was an Irish missionary. So he had Celtic spirituality, which I find so interesting. So she was influenced by Celtic spirituality, which is much more mystical than standard, Roman Catholic theology, you might say. Well, I may take that back, but even in the Catholic Church, mysticism is very has a limited scope.
But the higher ranks of Catholicism is more mystical. The lower ranks not so much. The higher ranks, yes. Right?
Yeah,
behind the scenes.
Well, yes, and certainly all the saints were mystical, and everyone who is a Catholic has been familiar with saints and some of the really wild experiences they had, like flying and miraculous things happen with the saints. Right. But for example, I gave a talk at a Catholic church in Ventura after I wrote the book, and I met with several people there to tell them what I was all about before I did the talk, and and so I said to the woman who was in charge of the women's group, I said, what would you say if I told you I was a mystic? Oops. Yeah. She said, well, I would say that that's up to the church to decide. and I understand her point, you know, and I don't mean to in any way criticize her, but that's the culture she grew up in. And it's so revered and sacred in that culture that only special people are considered to be real mystics. Now, in my view, we all have the capacity to experience mysticism. So, so this is part of the new liberation that I feel I want to, you know, encourage people to think about. And it's part of taking this, your own sovereignty is saying, yes, I can have a direct connection with God. I don't have to go through the priest or whoever.
And I think that's one thing that really scares the church is, you know, if their congregation chooses to have their own connection with God, then they no longer have a congregation. But yet,
exactly.
You know, but the irony is, you know, we're all so connected.
Yes.
You know, we can still have that connection and still have our own connection with God ourselves.
Yes, you know? Exactly. And, you know, this all ties into my life because I worked on books about the history of Christianity. And so I understand the basic concept that Constantine took basically what, you know, Jesus had said and what Paul had said, you know, the Bible at that time, and overlaid it onto government. So that's when government and religion started holding hands. And there's the good side and the very dark side of that.
Yeah, very dark side.
But go ahead.
I have to say, there is a lot of darkness going on right now. And I think all of darkness is coming to light, and I think it needs to come to light.
Yes.
And it's, you know, been since the beginning, right?
Yes.
Right now, I mean, one of the things I do with my day job, I process claims for sex abuse claims in the diocese, different dioceses.
Okay.
And it's really heartbreaking to see what different priests or bishops, archbishops have done to children, you know, like since the 40s.
Yes.
It's these same people that have been revered in small communities that, you know, that have, you know, impoverished families, you know, and it's just, to me, it's heartbreaking. And what has happened to people, you know, it goes down to their children, and you know, I'm seeing people who are now grandfathers or grandmothers.
Yes.
You know, and I know it goes down the generations, you know, and these children or the grandchildren, you know, they have issues and they don't know why they have issues. So it's in a way it becomes ancestral, right?
Yes.
And the priest, you know, who does the abuse, they were probably abused themselves. You know,
absolutely, probably.
It's a spiral thing.
Yes.
How does that get healed? You know, I mean, and it's part, and you know, by working on this, you know, by this person coming forward, you know, wanting to, you know, state a claim, to me, that's saying, okay, I want to heal this, you know, and I'm thinking, if this person's healing it, their child, their grandchild's going to be healed in a way, you know.
Yes.
And
Yes.
The abuser is going to be healed in a way, you know. But and I know it's all over the world, you know.
It is.
And
you know, yes.
But I know there's so much good, and I like to think there's more good.
Yes.
But how do we help heal this? You know, and I know Hildegard I feel like she's part of this healing.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Well, I would say the first thing that we need to do is confront it, which is starting to happen. You know, it's like any wound. If you pretend it's not there, it'll probably kill you. So the first thing you have to do is be honest with yourself and confront the pain and grieve the pain that someone who was so trusted betrayed you, so, and your family and the congregation. So the fact that people are speaking up and that people, the offenders are being, not always, but little by little, they're being unveiled and excommunicated in some cases. But for so many years, they were just hidden away, as you know, they were just sent to another parish. And that's the corruption that I think is in the process of being eliminated. It must be, because people will quit going to church if it's not, if it's not healed. And so first thing is, I think, to face the reality and to grieve it. It's so important for everyone to learn how to actually express in their body and grieve their deepest pain, which I went through that for almost a year. I cried every single day. It was so strange. So now from there, I think it's going to happen. I would like to think it will happen in a grassroots level. I think that women are on the rise, man. I'm telling you, the divine feminine is here. I mean, I'm an example of that. I felt like the divine feminine just grabbed me by the arm and said, "We're going this way now," And I see this happening in other people around me, friends and children, daughters of my friends that are powerfully speaking up about abuses in their home or in, whatever the context is. So the reason I think this is such a huge wound is because for, so long, the divine feminine has been demonized.
Right.
Women have been held back and blamed in so many cases for being victims.
Yeah.
And the more we become aware throughout history of what a common thread this is, I think the more women will stand up and say, "I'm sorry, I've had enough." That's what happened to me when I was working with Harper One. They changed their name from Harper San Francisco to Harper One. We were working on health books, spirituality, cutting edge philosophy, and but their system was corrupt, and they were almost killing some of their employees. Now I say that basically from my own experience, but there were two other art directors who left because of stress. One left because of stress. He was so stressed out. He worked there for maybe 10 years. He was so stressed out by the time he left, he took a year off and traveled all over the world because he just couldn't take it anymore. Then there was another art director who followed him, who after a few months became so ill, physically ill. She was in the hospital with a disease the doctors couldn't even identify. She nearly died. Okay. Yeah. So there was my friend Jim who left because of stress. And then there was another art director who left because she almost died. And then within a year, I was in the same position where I was working so hard, I nearly had a nervous breakdown. And when I quit working, I just, well, that's a whole story in itself, because I made it very clear to the president of Harper, how dare you?
Right. Well, good for you doing that.
Yes. And how dare you publish these books and then, kill your art directors, your creative people.
Wow.
That's patriarchy for you, and by the way, I have stopped using the word patriarchy because people get so confused. They think it's men,
That's not.
And I use the word oligarchy because that's more accurate. And that way we get the genders out of the story. But oligarchy is when, a few people have the power and the rest of us are slaves. And that's how I felt working in modern publishing. It was crazy. And I did talk to the president and I said, you're going to hear about this. This is not over. What you're doing is wrong, and I'm here to tell you this. And he listened to me, and they did make some changes. But I had to move on because now I work, like I said, with smaller publishers that treat me really well. They appreciate me, and I do great projects with them. So that's how I've, grabbed sovereignty for myself.
Right. And I think it's really important to start doing things like that to set an example for younger people.
Yes.
Like Simone Biles, for example, with the Olympics.
Yes.
That was a huge example for young people.
Awesome. Yes.
Taking mental health into your own hands.
Absolutely. That's a great example. That is such a great example. And then there was that example, I think it was two runners who, ran, both won, and then they shared the medal, and they were hugging each other. This is the world we're talking about, where people, are allowed to be human beings and are honest with what's real. So yeah, I mean, there's so many things happening, in politics. Stacey Abrams, is making amazing progress in terms of voter rights, for Blacks. I hope she's president someday. She's amazing. And there's just so many people that are speaking up powerfully. Women are speaking up powerfully, and some men, are starting to get it also. One of the reasons I really love Matthew Fox's books, he's one that's been speaking up for the divine feminine for most of his career, and he's been demonized for it also. He was basically excommunicated by Pope Benedict. So there is a price we pay, all of us, to become our own sovereign. And I just want to encourage people to do that. It's it's not easy. Like I said, the last 7 years of my life, I've had to revamp everything. But the beauty of it is that I feel, I feel Hildegard, I feel the Holy Spirit, I feel other guides and my ancestors helping me. My mom's side of the family moved from Bristol, England to the Massachusetts Bay Company in the 1600s. So they were successful merchants. They were affluent. They came to the New World to create the New World. Now we're creating another new world.
Yeah, we have.
So, and I'm not doing it by moving. I'm doing it by changing my lifestyle and my values and working toward justice and equality.
Right.
And that's what we need to do.
Yeah, we have no other choice.
And each in our own little sphere of influence is what I say. I think we're all mystics. I think we're all artists also.
Yeah, I agree with that completely.
Yeah. So I applaud you for making the changes you've made and for having this wonderful interview show.
I think it's so important what you're doing too, because when I see the young children out there, they have to learn who they are, and they see more and more people tuning into who they are.
That's right.
Claiming their sovereignty, knowing that they can connect with God or whoever they choose to connect with, whether it's goddess or the universe or whether
spirit, whatever you want to call it.
Exactly. It's so much more than something on. It's like going within, and when they find that and have that awakenedness, and I think there's such a difference from being woke than awakened.
Yes, good point.
And to really, it's like, I don't care what color you are, I don't care what gender you are, but just to get that connectedness with God. You are, we're all connected. And we've all, our soul never dies. We've been everything. We'll never die.
We are immortal beings.
It's like we're in this moment of now, and this moment of now will always be. Right. And I just, anything's possible.
It is. And Hildegard, like I said, she's just such a great example. If she can do this in the Middle Ages, okay, I think we can make it ourselves.
Yeah, and we know about it. I'm like, awesome.
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to write a movie about her. It's like, it's like, how awesome would that be? I mean, we've seen movies about, Joan of Arc, and we've, all
right.
it's like, Hildegard.
Yes.
It's like, what does she look like? Who is she?
Yes.
Who would play her? It's like, can you imagine this woman with like such chutzpah? It's like going up to the Pope and giving him advice and
exactly.
It's like
she was the ultimate feminist, really. And yes, I love the idea of doing. There is a movie I will recommend. I think it's Danish. It's European, but it's called Vision. The name of it is Vision, and it's the life of Hildegard. It's the best movie I've seen about her life. But there's some question about whether certain aspects of that movie are accurate. But it's a good movie to start with, absolutely. But I would love to see another updated movie about Hildegard and her life. She's a queen, like she said. Let me just find this real quick.
Okay, so whenever anyone says how accurate, okay, everything is always up for interpretation. So how can they say if it's accurate or not? Because no one was actually there.
Yeah, right.
So, but I'll definitely check that out.
Well, yes, but she wrote extensively. So there's a lot of documentation from her time period that is still, in existence. There's a center, Hildegard Center in Bingen, that keeps a lot of her stuff. Also, the reason she got credit for being possibly the first writer of an opera is because she documented everything, and it was attributed to her. So this was proven to be her writing. So maybe other people wrote stuff before that, but it wasn't documented. So and then her music was all documented. And of course, back then we didn't have the notes and everything that we have now, the way of writing musical notes. So it was primitive, but we have the basic information for the music that she wrote. And her music is just, it's just glorious. And the words, the poetry with it. Well, let me just go back for 1 second and say that this is some of her chutzpah, as you said. She says to Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, O king, it is of utmost necessity that you take care how you act. In the mysterious vision, I see you acting like a child. You live an insane, absurd life before God. There is still time, she says. And then I just want to tell one other really quick story about her. So she lived to be 81, which is more than twice what most people live to in that age. And at the age of 80, she had one of the worst things happen to her in her career. There was a young man who visited her monastery and was dying. He'd been in the war and he had injuries, but he had been excommunicated from the Catholic Church. So she took care of him. He passed away, but before he passed away, she gave him absolution and he confessed his sins. And so she buried him in the consecrated burial ground of their monastery. So when her, let's see, who was it? It was the Archbishop of Mainz, who she was very connected with and helped her a lot during her career. He found out about this and was like, no, this isn't going to happen. So he basically threatened her by saying, I am going to put this interdict on your people, and you cannot do service. You cannot sing the office every day. You cannot do services. I'm shutting you down until you move the body out of into non-consecrated land. Okay. So she wrote him a passionate letter saying, outlining all of her reasons for why she felt he was worthy. And the Archbishop still said no, and still continued with the interdict. Well, so then she walked 50 miles. She walked 50 miles at 80 years old to have a personal, meeting with the Archbishop. And, again, tried to explain herself. He still said no. So then she wrote him a letter and said something like, those who keep music from happening in this world will end up in the next world, conscripted to a place with no music where the devil lives. So she basically told him to go to hell. And guess what? He changed it. He changed his mind. I mean, she was so tenacious. Like that story alone is just so amazing, you know, to be 80 years old. And, you know, when you walked somewhere during that time period, it was dangerous. You know, there were highway robbers, and 80 years old. I mean, she was unstoppable. Then she died like a week later.
She knew she was protected. She knew she wasn't alone.
She did. Yeah. Her consciousness was so, you know, like Saint Francis could talk to the wolves and the birds, you know, and he never had problems with wild animals because his consciousness was so high. And I think that's the same with her. Jane Goodall is another example of someone who would sleep in forests, you know, all night long, and she could have easily been killed, but she never was. So it was that love, you know, it was that high consciousness love. And that is, in a sense, I feel like we all need to understand who the saints were so we can become more saint-like.
Right.
And take it out of the religious category and make it more a human ability, you know?
We all have that ability. Yeah.
We do. And we're being pressed right now to go there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's time.
It is.
I love it. Oh,
yes.
You're so awesome. I'm so glad.
Well, so are you. I'm so glad to meet you, and I hope to stay in touch with you. And
we're going to do this again. So
yeah.
I see, you know, when your book is out again, when your book is out again, we're going to do this again.
Okay.
And, you are going to, and I see you doing classes. You know,
okay.
I see right. You're going to do it and sign me up, and you're just going to do it.
Well, you know, I feel very like my life has geared me toward that, because I've been all about creativity. And, you know, I've done book covers, like I said, for over 20 years. And I didn't even realize until I started studying metaphysics more in depth and reading about Hildegard, the concept of channeling, you know, which to some people, that's a scary word. To me, it's not. It's just opening yourself up and receiving information, you know, that you're meant to have. And so at one point I realized that I was channeling book covers, you know, like it was just, you know, I call it the Holy Spirit. Everybody's got their own, you know, version of that. But the Holy Spirit would literally hover over me and tell me what to do when I was designing book covers. Yeah. And this is such an exciting collaboration,
right?
You know, I mean, it's exciting to collaborate with you and other people, but we can also collaborate with, you know, this intelligent, benevolent creator energy that we are embedded in, and who is all around us, and it gives us superpowers.
It does.
In a way.
It does. Yeah.
And so we need superpowers right now.
Definitely right now.
Yeah. So yes. So I'm going to be doing like maybe 10 or 15 minute YouTube videos, and then when my book is ready, I will be selling the book with the videos. But yeah, that could be made into some sort of curriculum. It could be made into a movie. Oh, by the way, I wanted to say, it's already, my book, as well as some other books' influences, came together with a friend of mine, and she and her husband wrote a musical play about Hildegard's life. Ooh. And it was so adorable. I went to go see it. It was done by a group of, I think, 5th and 6th graders in a Waldorf school.
Oh, nice.
And they had awesome, you know, backdrops and costumes, and the kids were amazing.
Oh, awesome.
So sky's the limit with Hildegard, really.
I think she's amazing. I just think she's, yeah.
You know, and since I had so much experience personally in the evangelical church, which is my perception is they're very fear oriented. You know, they and that their theology is quite shallow. They don't know a lot about church history, and they're afraid of Catholics, which at least back then when I was part of that. So I was encouraged to stay away from the Catholic, folks, even though I did have a friend that was Catholic. And so when I would go into the bookstores to look at books, to get ideas for covers I was working on, I kind of stayed away from the Catholic books. And then when I finally found Matthew Fox's books, I wanted to punch someone because because his book, like the Original Blessing, I was looking for that book, but it had a Catholic icon on the cover, which I had been taught they're a cult. Stay away from that. Seriously, I mean that is true in that church. It's so sad. And part of the reason I wanted to write the book about Hildegard was for people like me who had baggage and, some really bad experiences in the evangelical church, to make that transition away from that into more of a universal understanding of God. And, I know there's people out there like me who have said goodbye to the evangelical church. I don't know where they are. I hope they show up.
No, I think too right now what's happening is we are embracing a more universal religion. It's people, I think with more understanding, like with the internet, people becoming more aware of different religions.
Yes.
More of an understanding of different, like the divine feminine, the divine masculine, losing a lot of this fear. I think there is more of a universal acceptance.
Yes, absolutely.
I think like Mother Mary and the goddesses and the saints, and whether they accept or not. What's interesting, like with films, going back to films, like Christian films, from what I heard, they don't like to use Mother Mary in films or anything that depicts. And I'm like, well,
right.
Wait a minute, that doesn't. You're missing out a whole audience. So, I mean, things are shifting.
Yes, they are.
It's
exciting. It's very exciting. Yeah. And people, I think, are stepping back from the church and kind of creating their own view of things. But some of them are still staying in touch, with the church. And I think, I have sort of backed off from church the last few years. If I were to go back to church, I'd probably go to the Unity Church over the Episcopal Church. I don't know. So there are people, the Unity Church is pretty much there. I mean, they're very universal in their view of things. But yes, I agree. It's like we have to, like we were saying, we have to go back inward and then follow what our intuition is telling us. So we can, be that change that needs to happen in the world, and then it spreads out.
Yeah, and so it is compassion, respect. It's like
yes. I think compassion is one of the key words right now. If you don't have compassion, then your religion is useless.
Exactly.
And we're seeing a display of compassionless religion in our country in particular play itself out in the worst possible way. But I don't let that get me down. It's just the apocalypse. It's just the unveiling, and it's opening the bandage of the wound so we can confront it, and heal it, like you said. And healers are popping out of nowhere. Like I consider myself, an indigenous, mystical person. I'm still trying to figure out what I am, but I'm not, like Hildegard, I'm not formally trained, but I'm more of the practice rather than the theory. Like I read the theory, Matthew Fox and other people, his books are not for everyone. They're academic and they can be a little bit dry, but they're very informative. And I've read those books, but I'm interested in the practice, and speaking of that, another thing I will be doing is I've come up with this idea called Hildegardeners. Ooh. Hildegardeners. And at some point I will have a website, which will, a Facebook page and a website, encouraging people to be Hildegardners. It's in my book here somewhere and I'm not finding it. But anyway, I do address this because the idea of the Hildegardner will be, in a sense, greening the world one small garden at a time.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, so the book, the Viriditas Press, will be books that green the soul. And then Hildegardners will be literally creating gardens. You know, if you have a one-pot garden, you're part of it. If you have acres of gardens, you're part of it, right? And I have a raised bed, a large raised bed outside here where, you know, I grow as many vegetables and herbs as I can. And I'm working on making that larger and encouraging other people in my community to do the same thing. But, you know, a lot of people are in shock right now, you know, and we've been quarantined and people are coming out of quarantine going, is it safe to come out? You know, well, now's the time to start a garden. And it's time to develop a relationship with the earth, you know, and with God. It's a beautiful thing. And it makes life so much more meaningful than going out and buying the latest tennis shoes or whatever. For $200.
Right. All right, Barbara. Well, thank you again. All right, keep in touch. We'll talk again really soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. God bless you.